I thought it was a bad joke. It's not. Erin O'Toole has just hired Huawei's former vice president in Canada to run the Conservative Party's most important department. Jake Enright, who was the vice president at Huawei, is now in charge of Erin O'Toole's research and issues management. I can't even believe it. I had heard the rumor and thought, no way. But it's true. They're even bragging about it. Here's the Ottawa-focused news site, iPolitics. It's in a story about hill movers, as in movers and shakers. Let me quote the story. Another staffer heading back to the Hill after a brief hiatus in the private sector. Jake Enright, who started a new gig this week handling research and issues management for the Conservatives. Since May 2019, he had worked for National Public Affairs, and he also served briefly as Vice President of Corporate Affairs for Huawei Technologies. But that's not quite true. Here's Enright's LinkedIn page, his own resume. You can see he was hired in June of 2018 as the Director of Corporate Affairs for Huawei Canada. I bet that paid pretty well. He was in charge of corporate affairs in December of 2018, which is when his boss, the company's CFO and the daughter of the president, her name is Meng Wanzhou, was arrested in Vancouver on charges of fraud. And immediately after that, the Chinese dictatorship kidnapped 2 Canadian civilians, seizing them right off the streets of Beijing as retribution, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. Enright was the Director of Corporate Affairs for Huawei Canada during this crisis. As you can see by his resume, he left the position the very next month, but not because he quit in disgust with Huawei and in solidarity with Canada. He left his position as director because he accepted a promotion. The very next month, he accepted a promotion to become the key architect of Huawei's propaganda war here in Canada against our country, against the 2 Michaels, and in defense of the dictatorship. He got the promotion immediately after the 2 Michaels were kidnapped. He was made VP. For nearly a full year, he worked for that Chinese Communist Party front company, a company that got its start by hacking into Canada's great tech hope, Nortel. Remember them? Huawei stole their intellectual property and helped bankrupt them. That's who Jake Enright worked for. Huawei is accused of crimes. It's why Meng Wanzhou is under house arrest in Vancouver. Huawei is untrustworthy. They're an arm of the dictatorship. They spy. I'm not saying that Jake Enright is a criminal. He didn't commit fraud, and he didn't kidnap anyone, and I don't think he's a communist. Sort of the opposite. He probably got paid a lot of money to be Huawei's point man on this. None of that is illegal, but it is disgraceful. Would you go to work for your country's enemy? So gross. But he made his choices. What on earth is Erin O'Toole doing, hiring him as the head of research and issues management right before a looming election campaign? Erin O'Toole just hired Meng Wanzhou's right-hand man in Canada to be O'Toole's right-hand man in Canada. Erin O'Toole just hired the man who spent a year strategizing against Canadian interests to strategize for O'Toole. What is going on? Erin O'Toole fired Derek Sloan from the caucus. Erin O'Toole fired Pierre Poilievre as finance critic. O'Toole's getting rid of strong conservatives, and I note that both Sloan and Poilievre were tough critics of China, so O'Toole is clearing out Canadian patriots like that and hiring a lobbyist for the Communist Party's favorite tech company. Here's Enright's official lobbyist registry in Canada. I don't even understand how that's possible, since it would be illegal under the Accountability Act for Enright to have actually lobbied then, given he had worked in the government within the previous 5 years. I don't know, maybe he was just registering out of an abundance of caution. But look, none of this is really about Enright. There's a lot of people in Canadian society who would sell out to China for a few pieces of silver. Our universities do, Hollywood does, a lot of businesses do. It's pretty common. China can buy the loyalty of a lot of people. But what's Erin O'Toole's excuse? You know, there's more than 37 million people in Canada. Millions of them are conservatives. Was the vice president of Huawei Canada really the most qualified Canadian for the job? There was no one else in our whole country who could do it? Literally the VP in charge of the company during the kidnapping of the 2 Michaels O'Toole saw that on this guy's resume and decided, that's the guy I want handling our most sensitive political files. So O'Toole sees Pierre Poilievre and Derek Sloan and thinks, they're embarrassing. They're a PR mess. Get rid of them. But he sees Meng Wanzhou's servant and says, that's my man. And they're bragging about it to a Parliament Hill news website. Just 2 weeks ago, the Conservatives were saying they don't trust Huawei. Here's a tweet they made. Our allies don't think it's safe to work with Huawei. You see, that's what they tell party members when they're asking for your donations. Look at the date of that, February 17th. Today's March 4th. There's no way they weren't already negotiating with Huawei's guy to come over to run the Conservative Party. There's no way they weren't saying one thing in private to the Huawei guy and another in public to get Conservative Party donors. Look at this tweet from 3 weeks ago. A Conservative MP was outraged that a Liberal Party activist went to work for Huawei. At that same time, Erin O'Toole was surely whining and dining Huawei's former VP to come work for him. What, did they think he wouldn't find this out? I'm shocked and grossed out, but I'd be lying if I said I was surprised. Erin O'Toole is untrustworthy. He said he was against cancel culture, but he's been a practitioner of it. He said he's against the carbon tax, but now he says he's for a net zero carbon policy. He says he's against Huawei in China, but now he just hired their top man in Canada to run the Conservative Party. I'm starting to think we can't trust a word he says, except for when he says he wants your donations. That I believe. So fair enough. If you want to go give Erin O'Toole money, click on conservative.ca and there's a big donate button right there. I think he needs your donations because I can't imagine this Huawei guy works cheap. He must have been making around $500,000 a year working for China. So if you're excited by this new hire, if you're glad Huawei's VP is now Erin O'Toole's VP, if you think this Huawei lobbyist is a better representation of conservative values than Pierre Poilievre or Derek Sloan, click on conservative.ca and give generously. But if you're sort of sick of O'Toole and his lies, and you actually want to fight back against Huawei in China, I have a better idea for you. Sign our petition at banhuawei.com. We'll deliver it to the government of Canada. It sounds like we need to deliver it to the opposition in Canada too. We have to let them know that this is not okay. We are not going to accept this. They need to rescind this job offer. Go to banhuawei.com and sign it if you actually think Huawei and the Chinese Communist Party, if you actually think they're evil and we should fight against them, not hire their leftovers, seriously, go to banhuawei.com and we will deliver this petition to the government of Canada and to Erin O'Toole, telling them to ban the Chinese spy company, just like many of our allies have done. Or, visit conservative.ca to help pay the salary of a former Chinese intelligence asset. That's what Erin O'Toole wants you to do. I can't believe that Erin O'Toole just hired the former vice president of Huawei Canada, who was in charge during the kidnapping of the two Michaels. I am grossed out by it. I got something you can do about it, though. Go to banhuawei.com and sign our petition.